Hey guys, Veronica here. So let's talk pruning tomatoes for a second because a lot of you guys are asking me about it and it's very important. So I figured we would just cover the basics. So there are two things I do when I'm pruning tomatoes. They happen all season long. One of them happens really early in the season. That's cleaning up all of the bottom growth. So when you're growing tomatoes, if you have leaves that are touching the soil and there's water splashing up on them, you have a much higher risk of getting early blight and other funguses and diseases on your tomatoes. So in order to avoid that, what we do is we prune up the bottom like 6 to 8 inches, anywhere where there's going to be like a splash zone. This is on drip irrigation, so it doesn't really get splashed, but say we get a freak rainstorm. Like, there's spores that live in the soil, and they will basically inhabit those lower leaves and then just make their way up the rest of the plant. Let's avoid that, and we'll just cut off these bottom leaves, anything that's touching the soil. The other thing I do when it comes to pruning tomatoes is I will prune out what are called suckers. And so a sucker is a branch that grows at a 45-degree angle, and it basically grows between the leaf and the main stem. It will basically, let's see if I can show you this. It'll basically just pull a lot of energy out of the plant. And it doesn't really grow like amazing fruit. It just takes a lot of the energy away. So instead of leaving the suckers to grow on indeterminate plants and just go all over the trellis and not really produce anything substantial, what we do is we cut those out and we train 1 or 2 main vines to grow up the trellis, and that way we have fruit that ripens by the end of the season. Now, you'll notice with different varieties of tomatoes, this works a little differently. When you get into like the spoon size, the currant size, some of the cherries, you may not do as much suckering and you may choose to let it ramble because those fruits will set just fine. With the larger varieties, as far as like a lot of beefsteaks and heirlooms, even some of the paste varieties, you will want to sucker, especially if you're in a short growing season, just to really give the fruit that's setting and the flowers that are already there a good chance of actually ripening before your first frost. So we just go in and we cut out these branches that are at the 45-degree angle. Sometimes they're small and you can just pop it out like this size. And then we have a good view of what our main stem looks like and can kind of train it up the trellis from there. So I'll go to the other side so that you can see what I'm talking about and move you guys just a little. So you can see there's like little suckers. They're just teeny tiny, and then a lot of times you'll see them. Catching them at this size is a really good idea because you can just pop it out with your fingers. It doesn't really harm the plant. Sometimes you'll get into these bigger ones, like there's one down here on this back side, and it's just like half of a branch. It's major. Now, if the sucker is the only thing that's growing on your plant, don't chop it off. Like, this is a, use your best judgment and common sense when you're pruning, especially when it comes to suckers. And sometimes they'll branch out and you start to see fruit forming and you can leave that one, but just be aware that the more suckers you leave on your tomato plant, the less chance you have of your fruit that's on there ripening because it's putting a lot of energy towards those parts of the plants. And also, the more suckers you leave on your plants, the denser your plant's going to be later in the summer, which kind of helps to block out some sun so that your tomatoes don't get as sun scalded. But you know, the trade-off is that you're basically creating this really dense plant, which in turn may end up getting a lot of disease, some insects and pests. You want some airflow going through there, which is why we train these up and why we keep them pruned. So I'm just coming through and I'll see, you know, where the pieces I can pop out that don't have fruit on them, and then cutting these like lower pieces as well that are touching the soil. And then we'll go through and do it on basically all of the tomato plants in the garden. So I'll show you another example because I've barely done any in this space, and maybe you can see it. Okay. So here's another one. Clearly this hasn't been pruned at all, and so we're looking at this just like a massive vine. we're gonna try and see what we can get out of here, because sometimes it's just like overwhelming mess of tomato plant everywhere. So I'll go down to the bottom of each of these. I'm gonna pick maybe 2, maybe 3 sometimes of the main stems that are growing at the base, because this variety, I'm not sure what it is. Oh, so this is a good example of the smaller ones. So this is the yellow pear tomatoes. They're those little, you know, yellow pear-shaped ones, and these grow like rambling everywhere. So I'll probably leave, you know, 2 or 3 branching out at the base because it's supporting a very small fruit, which ripens quickly. I still want to get a lot of the cover off the ground, just so we don't get any early blight, because that sucks when it happens. So I'll pull out any vines like this at the base that are just touching the ground. I'll just pop those out. This is actually one plant that's fallen over, so if you can get things on your trellises earlier than I do, you're in good shape. We had the heat, the temperatures just popped the last couple of weeks, and so now these guys are going a little crazy. But we'll see what we can do. And so we just want to get him into this trellis a little to get a better look at what's going on at the base. And you can see there's a lot of suckers down here. So we'll just cut some of those out. We'll pop out some of these 90 degree. Oh, here's a really good one to show you what I'm talking about. So, right here, there's basically like close to 90 degree angle. There's the main stem, and here's the next set of leaves. And then this right here is the sucker. So we're gonna cut that one because it's a little bit big and I don't wanna rip the plant in half. So you just cut it out, just like that, and pull it off. And then the plant will direct more of its energy up. And that's basically what I do as far as pruning tomatoes. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Hit the subscribe button if you want to see more how-tos, just like really basic gardening stuff as far as how I go about planting and pruning and working with various vegetables and herbs and fruits in the garden. And follow me on Instagram at Flavor Kit for really random adventures in food and farming. All right, happy gardening.